Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to recreate Scotland's only 4-level interchange. This you'll find just east of Glasgow. It connects the M8 and the M73 motorway while also providing access to local roads. I'll leave a link on Google Maps if you want to check it out. The footage in the video today is essentially an edited version of the live stream where I created this from scratch, so if you're interested to see how it's done in real time, feel free to check it out and I'll leave a link for that too. I've done a few recreations of real life, interesting or unusual interchanges. If you know of any yourself that look like they might be a good build for the game, drop me a link in the Discord or send me some coordinates in the comments and I'll add them to the list. Never know, I might make the one you send over. This one today though is essentially a version of the super common 3-level roundabout you'll see all over the UK, but it will have various amendments to provide some direct access and some indirect access to different motorway and non-motorway directions. Okay then, so let's get it built. We're back on RonFX interchange test map today, and the first thing I'm going to do is copy and paste over a couple more banks of traffic spawners into the map. We'll be needing 6 of these in total to feed the interchange today. I put out a bit of an outline for what is going to be the direction of the M8 motorway. This will be the road on the very lowest level of the interchange, so we're going to start there and then we're going to build our way up level by level. With the general curvature of the road in place, I went and brought the elevation down a bit, and with the terraforming, once it's in place, I just drew the road roughly along the path of the guide road I put down at that higher level. Once we get rid of that higher guide road, it was time to mark the centre spot, and that's basically where we can start changing elevations, and I'll just essentially just mark that as such. So I cleared it all back, then just smooth ramped it back up to the higher level. After terraforming a bit and tidying things up, it was pretty clear I messed up a bit on the elevation, so I just went ahead and raised the ground level a bit instead of messing about with it too much anymore. Terraforming is free, so make the most of it. So we do the usual semicircle stuff to get the main roundabout in place here above the lower motorway. It actually feels weird for me to say motorways making this video. I'm so used to saying highways or freeways. Now this main roundabout will need to be big enough to service multiple on and off ramps from the motorway below and the M73 that we'll be creating above, so we'll maybe need to make it a little bit bigger. Oh, and here comes the rain, so let's jump into dev mode and we can get rid of that. It still does my head in, the rain. Right, so I tentatively marked out where I thought the locations of the smaller roundabouts would be, and it became pretty clear that the big roundabout was definitely too small, so I got a bigger one in, just around the existing one, and then we delete the small one off the map. Time to get the first roundabout connections done. I curved it a bit, just because it looks nicer, and then it's easy enough to connect them, and it's just simple curves all around here. I am being mindful that we need to connect more roads down here, so I wanted that first connection as close to the lower motorway as possible. It will be a tight space down there once we're bringing the higher motorway off ramp down to that main roundabout. They'll be pretty much next to each other. The first of the roads connecting the small roundabouts is just a simple curved road. The second of these roads will need to run a different course, as there's going to be a couple of flyovers joining these roads in between, so a decent gap is required, but I still want them reasonably tightly packed, just like the real life one. So I used a combination of continuous and simple curves to get the angles I needed. Let's quickly check out the curvatures and check for any jank, and no, I think we're good here. I think we're good. It's always handy to correct the traffic direction as you go along, but dear God, after creating stuff with roads always driving on the right hand side, it took some adjusting doing all this on left hand side driving. And I drive left hand side every day, but it's just different doing it in the game. It's slightly brain melting, not gonna lie. Alright, so that pretty much covers the second level of this 4-level interchange, and I think we're off to a great start here. On to level 3 of this interchange, and this is going to encompass the M74, so that's the higher motorway. If you're building this from scratch, it's easier just to go full elevated, just build it as a big massive bridge, so you know the heights are going to work okay, you're going to get all the clearance that you need, and then you can basically just terraform around it. Just noticed the bridge was sagging, so that's a quick redo. And on to the terraforming now. First up is getting a measure for where to create the highest sections. So pulling out a road from the roundabout on each side and roughly getting the same slope angles is usually a good shout for getting similar looking ramps on both sides. Once we've got an idea where we want the ramps to start, it'll be a case of marking them off and then just upgrading the higher road and giving it an extra lane. Adjustments might need to be made as running these ramps off ground instead of the side of the highway, the bridge section, pretty much always tends to work better. These ramps will need at least a 7-degree angle coming off the main road. Anything else and it's just going to give you a bit of jank when it splits off the main road. So I pulled these pretty much straight out and then just give them a slight curve at the end where it's going to meet the roundabout. Anytime a ramp isn't smooth or a connection isn't smooth, I'm going to be deleting it and I'm going to rework it and maybe add a bit of terraforming if it's needed until I'm happy. You can't go to the effort of building something like this and leave lots of untidiness. My missus will be laughing watching that because I'm not exactly renowned for my tidiness around here, so occasionally you can get round a bit of road connection jank with Move It. Doesn't always help, but it is worth a go. I'm going to mostly repeat the process on the other side, but it'll have the added complication that there are going to be 2 service roads that will definitely be getting in the way, but we'll deal with them in just a minute. Let's get the ramps in first, and then we can just build around them. We can't really mess about with the slope angles on the ramps, so it's these service roads connecting to the roundabouts, they're the ones that are going to have to be adjusted. That in place, let's do the truck test. So grab a truck from Find It, slot it under. If it doesn't fit, you need to adjust. So that lower road, that's going to have to be lower yet. On the other side, the ramp would just connect straight into the roads below, so I had to remove them and connect the ramp to the elevated section where it's going to be going over. We're going to play about with this until we get a happy crossing. Remember, it's not just the elevation height that we want smooth, we want the curvature of the roads looking good too. They were nice and smooth earlier and we'll very much be wanting to recreate that when we rebuild them. So here, just a case of finding the elevation that works and that gives enough clearance essentially. So we'll bring the land down, slope it back up to where it needs to connect to the service roads, and we'll just play about with that until we find the elevations and the slopes that are going to work. It's looking a bit more like it, isn't it? Yeah, think I'm happy with that. Perfect. Okay, so we got the M73 ramps in okay. That's the higher motorway ramps. Things are still looking messy, but that's fine for now. We'll continue to build functionality and we'll continue to build connections. All of this will still need to be tidied up later on, okay? I spotted a little jank in the road, so let's remove that section with markers. We'll just draw a smooth curve back in. That's much better. Time now to connect the east side of the M8 to the roundabout. That's the lower road. I'll just run a slope up and connect both with a simple curve, just like we did with the higher main road. Now it's time to prepare for some of the interchange's biggest ramps. These are the only direct motorway to motorway turns on this interchange. Kind of like a partial Y interchange almost, if you like, between those two highways. And this is where one ramp will be a underpass running under several of the roads that we've built already, and the other will be the highest level road, which is going to be the big overpass, and that overpass will connect eastbound traffic on the M8 directly to the southbound M73. These ramps will connect quite far back on the higher motorway, just like it does in real life. So I'm going to mark these out first where I want them to start and end on each main road. For the underpass, I went ahead and terraformed a slope and then just converted the roads to elevated or bridged sections. It was obvious the traffic wouldn't clear those bridge sections, so I just decided to keep it flat and then we'll start the slope after the traffic clears these new bridges. Now, just for the crack, I tried to get it in a oneer and, you know, it almost worked. We almost got there. Not quite. Sadly, there was a bit of jank on the connection and the slope was a bit uneven as well, but hey, it was worth a punt. It was worth a go. So what I decided to do was just pull out a little start of each ramp on each road and then each one at a tight angle, but not too tight. Then just going to connect them with a simple curve, and then you need to make sure that we hit the guideline or as close to the guideline as possible. You can get away with a little imprecision really on these really big curves. We're going to give access to the M8 motorway on the city centre side, which is the west side, and we'll be doing that by creating a couple of flyovers connecting the smaller roundabout network to that motorway. What I prefer doing here is to get the whole curve in and just find the minimum crossing height. It's a bit trial and error sometimes, but I'm just going to keep redrawing it until I'm happy with it. I covered this technique extensively on the video on how to upgrade any interchange. So if you want to get a firmer grip or grasp on getting these big, smooth, complex overpass curves into place and looking decent and smooth, go check that video out. When I'm happy with the curve, I'm going to trim it back and just leave the flyover section where it will be at its highest and leave that section. We know it clears all the roads below and we know it's all heading in the right angles over those roads as well. So when that's in its place, it's just a case of getting the road connected wherever it needs to go. In the case here, I needed a complex curve to create or complete this section, and it went in really nice and smooth. I'm really happy with that one. On the other side of the lower motorway, the M8, a simple curve will do the job. You can either upgrade the road first with the extra lane, then downgrade once the connection's in, or you can fire it straight into the existing lane configuration. But if you don't redraw that last section again, it'll look untidy. I finished that bit off by redoing the untidy curve section, just deleted any highway pillars on the road as well. And that has come out looking great. I am happy with that. For the next connection, it's only going over one road, so it should be pretty straightforward. We'll get that in its place now. It might come out with some sharper bends than would be ideal, but we still need space for the big overpass to fit in between this ramp and the lower motorway. I decided to leave it incomplete for now. I'll get the slope ready to complete these last two ramps, but I'll need to revisit it once we're good to go with that higher overpass. I want to get that in first. I'm going to use the same technique to get the highest points in place first with angles that will work again. So a bit of trial and error once more involved here until I can find what's going to work. Happily, the complex curve I used to connect the higher motorway to the overpass went in perfectly first time. Usually with these complex curves, I try and get the 2 points where we're creating the angles roughly at a third, then 2/3 distance in your curve. Try and keep those curve points uniform, if that makes sense. It tends to give the best result. On the other side, let's trim that overpass right back to the highest point that's necessary on it, and I went for a big simple curve on that. It seemed to work well, slotting right on top of that terraforming we did earlier without any adjustments, so brilliant, happy days. A little bit of move it to smoothen things out here was required, and we're looking good for this section of road. That smaller ramp is ready for connecting now, and with the big overpass in place, we can upgrade a section of that to two-way, and we'll figure out a good connection point where we can bring the smaller bridge section back and then just reconnect it straight into that two-lane road. Perfect, happy days. And that, ladies and gentlemen, should give us all the main functionality of the Baillieston Interchange. Time for a tidy up and time to hook this bad boy up and get some traffic moving. I'll need to sort out the wider terraforming sections and really just soften things up a bit. There's going to be various key walls to be created, and I'll need to smoothen out the connection to the ground around them as well. Some of the key walls will need to be moved away from the roads, they will overlap a little bit, and I'm going to hook up some traffic spawners, but I will be removing a reasonable number of those spawners as the roundabouts just simply don't cope, you know, with that amount of traffic if we keep them all in place. So we want to keep it kind of reasonable and keep things moving. There's quite a bit of terraforming and key wall work, so I'll show some of it here. If you want to see more, it's all on the live screen, but I'll not show every single part of it. It can get a little bit repetitive, obviously. That said, if you want to get your interchanges looking as good as possible, I think it's a completely necessary process if you're doing it yourself. So if you've not really seen it and you're not too familiar with it, it is worth having a look at the individual bits and pieces to figure out. Okay, so that's looking like a hell of a nice base to start some proper detailing now. Going to be adding various surfaces here. We're going to be using the concrete, the mulch, the bus lane colour, as well as the riverbed surfaces as well. One very important detail that was requested by Andy in the live chat was the field of horses that apparently live here beside the motorway, and I think we figured out that the horses actually live about a mile and a half down the road on a different interchange, but I put them in there anyways. We'll give them the required active area, we'll plop down some spawners, I'll stick in a fence, we'll give them some trees so they're happy, and then we'll be good to go with that one. I'll get the rest of the safety barriers in place with the key walls where I think it's going to be appropriate, and I'm going to get the rest of the detailing in place now. I'll pop it on a short time lapse and I'll come back and have a quick word on whether it's worth building something like this in your own city. So I'll catch up with you in a minute. So here's a few sweeping shots of the interchange in full flow, and while you're enjoying these shots, I just want to thank you all for watching and making it this far. If you have enjoyed this kind of thing, or if you haven't, let me know in the comments and leave a like or a dislike. Big shout out to everyone who joined when this was being filmed live, and as always, a massive thank you to anyone who's contributed to the channel, whether that's a Patreon membership or through a YouTube membership or a super thanks or whatever. Thanks very much, it's always appreciated. So I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of the traffic flow shots, and I'll catch you in the next one.